Hello and welcome to the Droid and Dragon Cantina, a podcast highlighting independent science fiction and fantasy authors. Our guest this week is Ben Shenkman, the author of the Devil You Know series. In this episode, we talked about religion and pop culture and writing urban fantasy in New Haven, Connecticut. So welcome to the show, Mr. Ben Shenkman. So tell us a little, about what are your main books that are out there right now?
Yeah. So first I'm going to hit my microphone stand. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. The series that I have out right now, the series is called The Devil You Know. And the first book is My Boss is the Devil. That's the first in the series. And then there are two more in that series right now. It goes My Boss is the Devil, Dueling Shoulder Angels, and then Too Many Gods in the Kitchen. And that's currently what's published. Book one, My Boss is the Devil, is also available as an audiobook that I narrate and produce myself.
So at what age did you catch the writing bug?
If I'm going to go back, I have to go way back. I was one of those nerdy kids that was like writing little stories in elementary school. I did some writing in middle and high school, but high school was pretty much reserved for angsty poetry. And then I actually didn't. I didn't get the writing bug. For real in the past 2 years. But the reality is I wrote the first draft of My Boss is the Devil about 10 years ago. I wrote it during National Novel Writing Month, 2014, and then ended up shelving the book for, 9 years.
So did you actually have like an actual boss from hell that inspired all that?
I've had many I'm actually still connected to some people that I worked with at the time, and I have had people ask whether they were the boss. But no, I did feel like I was working in kind of a dead-end job, but none of my bosses were bosses from hell. I would never say that. That's not the whole thrust of the book is, what if the devil offered me a job? Like, that's kind of where the inspiration came from, because I was working a job that I didn't feel like had a really strong future. And I said, what would happen if the devil just sauntered up to me and offered me a job? And then on top of that, what if that wasn't the worst thing that happens during the book? What if the devil isn't really the bad guy? So yeah, it's not autobiographical. There are no real world bosses were renamed in this particular series.
Uh-huh. So is it like, were you in kind of into that whole genre? Because I know like it's funny. You kind of got me on this kick when I was getting ready for this interview, starting to look at kind of like the devil in literature, obviously, the Bible, the first big one. And then there's like, I was looking up, then you had like Dr. Faustus, which is like in the late 1500s. And then like in, I think about 1667, you had Paradise Lost came out. And then, then of course, when you get to like America, then you get like Robert Johnson and the devil, doing the deal with the devil at the crossroads. And it's just something, it feels like that's a well that never seems to run dry.
It's true. And honestly, people love personifications of the devil. Like, it's very popular. I will say, I wrote the draft of this book before the TV show Lucifer ever existed. So like, I was not inspired by that, but the reality is a lot of charismatic devils exist in popular media. I will say my books take a different approach in that Lucifer in this book sets it up, and it's up to you whether or not you believe him, because it all could just be a convenient lie. But in my books, hell isn't necessarily a bad place. And there's other media that covers it. And think about Dante's Inferno, and there's the levels of hell.
Right.
And the levels that are closest to the surface are, how far away are they from heaven? And so my book set it up a little bit differently in that Lucifer is doing his best to take custody of as many souls as possible, but if you believe him when he tells you, it's not for any nefarious purposes other than maybe a bet with God that happened a really long time ago.
Mm. So is it like so like was the series Lucifer? Does that kind of prompt you? It's like, okay, maybe I need to go back and dust this thing off because maybe it's got a better set of legs than I thought it had. Originally when you maybe wrote it, the first time.
No, I have to blame TikTok. So one of my favorite creators on TikTok, her account name is Atomic Apple Pie, and she reads like bad romance written by men. Like she's the one with like the book in a spray bottle and will read like passages that are really just horrendously bad.
Oh,
Like whoever wrote them, men or women, it would be awful, but it's men who are writing these. So, she'll read the passage and then like spray the screen and they're like, no. And I said to myself, and I'm listening to these and it's god awful. And I said to myself, I wrote a book and it can't possibly be as bad as any of this. And these are published, like these are published books. So like, why didn't
yeah.
I publish it? Also, 10 years ago, yeah, self-publishing was a thing, but it was still seen as primarily where authors that couldn't get published went,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to now, which self-publishing is really the refuge for artists who want their work to be seen, because traditional publishing, frankly, fails most authors.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that's something I was thinking about. I mean, part of my thing for wanting to do this podcast is just that there's so many. It seems like, and maybe I don't know if it's me just being more aware of it, but this seems like this explosion in the last, God, maybe like 10 or more. I don't know, maybe it's 10 going back 10 years or more. But like you said, there was definitely like some point there was a shift between being self-published was like where you went if you couldn't make it, to where now everybody's like, well, why don't I just publish my own stuff? And that suddenly becomes not just acceptable, but like, I can't tell you how many authors I found about, you're talking about TikTok, you get into like book talk and all that, like how many of these people are self-published. And there was a big story recently. I don't want to get the lady's name. I want to say, is it Callie Hart? Maybe you know this person. I apologize if I'm getting it wrong, but there's an author who's an indie author who just made like it scored this huge deal, getting like it's either going to be like a series or movies. I should have brushed on it before I came on here, but I was kind of spacing and doing other stuff. But yeah, like that suddenly that's a thing, and I'm even hearing stories about how now a lot of the big studios are circling around some of these spaces looking for stuff to snatch up, because that's nowadays everything has to be a franchise or a series. Like you can't just make one thing and stop. Like now it's got to be a trilogy or multiple seasons of TV or whatever. So everybody is like, that hunger for content is still out there, but I feel like now they're looking towards different venues than they would have, traditionally speaking.
It's true, but one thing I'll say about traditional publishing versus independent publishing, a lot of trad is still very middle of the road. There are plenty of authors that that start out as independent and they manage to go viral somehow and catch the attention of a big 5 publisher or even just a larger indie house, and they'll get signed for a deal. But in many of these cases, a lot of these books, and no shade to them, like congratulations on getting a book deal, unfortunately, many of them are still aggressively mediocre. Like these are books that started off as independently published. But one of the problem with a lot of like the whole New York Times bestseller business is it has to appeal to such a broad audience that it cannot challenge nearly anything. So if your book challenges conventions, it unless you manage to hook the right people, your book will not see the light of day for a traditional publisher. And there's a lot of people that go to Book Talk and specifically say, look, I've read all of these Book Talk books that I have seen constantly on this platform, and I need other ones because they just don't, they're just not doing it for me. And it's just kind of how it goes. But again, traditional publishing is a really weird beast in that things that you would think are perfectly commercially viable, everything is so subjective. Like I would happily go through what a very realistic schedule is for getting like book deals. And it's just horrifying. And if you're like me and you're saying my book has languished on a shelf for a decade and I want it to see the light of day and I'm not waiting for another 4 years to try and snag a publisher, you know?
Yeah, I mean, because it's like, I mean, you're losing time. I've done a similar thing. I had a short film a few years back that I think I talked to the subject of the film, and we talked about like, do we try to spend all this time getting it into film festivals, and then you have to go out there and promote it, and you have to travel around and do all that, or we can just put it out on YouTube. And because this guy is an artist and he wants his stuff out there, he was just like, yeah, let's just go ahead and throw it out. And I mean, and even like you said, like for authors, for filmmakers, like YouTube, I've seen some beautiful stuff on there. Like, yeah, there's a lot of your just kind of your typical kind of like talking head videos. There's no shortage of those, or just fan videos. It's all good, but there's also every once in a while you'll come across something that's just like is like legit nice. He's like, oh, this could easily be on, this could be something you'd see like on National Geographic or some other big another big name channel, but someone just like, okay, they just chose to go here because it was the quickest way to get it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so this gets to the heart of like one of the things an author has to do, any author, you have to decide why you're publishing. If you're publishing to have your story heard, your art consumed by people, you don't need traditional publishing. Is it harder to get it out there? Maybe, but at the same time, it's certainly possible. Are you doing it to make a living? Well, if so, even that gets complicated because there are plenty of authors that are making a living doing self-publishing, and that also kind of gets down to which genre you're in. So that even that, why do you want to publish? And if it's to make money, then you have to care about which genre you're writing in. Are you writing to the market? Are you putting books out there that are commercially viable in the truest sense? Like if I wanted to make money, I would be writing romance. And at this point, specifically dark romance, because like it is super, like you will make bank if you can write to the market in nearly any romance genre. And a lot of those authors will explode because readers are hungry for material. And in many cases, that kind of material, people also eat like popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always looking for what the next good book is.
It's kind of like in movies with the horror genre. An actress I talked to who's becoming a director, name's Hannah Fearman. She was kind of saying that the horror is like the bubble that never bursts in movies. It's all like there's always going to be some demand for horror movies, whether it's like, comic movies coming, maybe going, the action is like, there's always, you see like certain trends popping up from here to there, but like horror is just always there.
Yeah, my partner is an absolute horror fiend, and I experience that in real time when it's like, oh, this is a new thing that just came out. We should watch it. Like we've watched horror gets views, and I don't know if this is a corollary to certain book genres or not, but even not great horror movies will get a lot of views simply because people want to see what it's about. Like people give horror movies a pass like no media I have ever seen.
Don't get me started on that one. That I know so many people that will watch any horror movie, whether it's good or bad, and they will just eat it up. Mm-hmm. And again, I guess that's, you talking about like the romance thing. Like I briefly worked in Barnes and Noble back in the day, and I feel like that was that one section that was just always, somebody was always coming through, right?
Yeah, like what is it? I'm trying this. It's a portmanteau, but it's actually not the one that I was thinking of. But like a lot of stuff that's like bad. It's like terrific, but it's also bad.
Yeah.
People have my favorite worst movie as opposed to my favorite movie, and they'll watch them equally. So again, like, if I was going to be a filmmaker, I'd probably want to make horror movies if I wanted movies to sell, as opposed to waiting for waiting 10 years to get a blockbuster hit that goes to all of the theaters. That's like the difference between indie and trad.
Well, there's also like there's a guy, a filmmaker up in Minnesota. His name is Christopher R. Mim.
Hmm.
Like I think for about like 18 years, he put out a movie a year, just making intentionally bad horror movies, and that was his thing. And he would like rent out local theaters and would sell them out. Like it just became like in that area, it's like a thing to do. But again, because it's that there's just I'm sure even like you say, which like how many times you ever I don't know maybe in recent years nowadays you can have like a Kindle, but like you always go somewhere or anybody where someone's like pulling out a book and there's probably gonna be somebody with like a trashy looking romance novel somewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting though because, and I think something speaks to the way that the world is right now. People are really we're torn between wanting to witness what's going on in the world. At the same time, escapism is at like an all-time high. So,
Oh yeah.
if you're writing apocalyptic fiction right now, you may not be getting as many reads as like cozy fantasy or like romance where people are like, I could get away from all of this for a little while.
Yeah, it's definitely it's weird though, but I think it was also because for a while there, apocalyptic fiction, of all kinds was
Oh
definitely
yeah.
like there was a new series or a new movie or something coming out like every week about it.
Hmm.
Like
I,
I don't
I
know if
I
I don't know if it's as
hear
hot as it was, but it was definitely. I mean, like you could not escape that genre for a few years.
I hear it's coming back a bit. Like I've heard like rumors that apocalyptic fiction is like having a resurgence, but yeah, romance is a genre that never dies. But to my earlier point, I wouldn't be writing urban fantasy if I wanted to make money, right?
Mhm.
So writing urban fantasy, it's because I have stories that I want to tell and I want readers to actually read them. So I'm a self-published urban fantasy author. I have queried, so again, like I've tried knocking on doors both for publishers that accept open submissions as well as agents. And I get nothing but form letters back, even though like the response to my writing has been extremely positive. It's if you're not writing in the correct genre, you could query for years, even if you have a fantastic manuscript, just because urban fantasy isn't in right now, unless you're, Jim Butcher or have a connection to that, to publishers in that genre. Like right now, the only thing that I've heard about my chosen genre is nobody wants it.
Mm. Well, I feel like nobody wants it until someone breaks through. It's always a certain thing because, like, because mentioned comic book movies earlier, because it was a year for years. I guess, like in the like back in the '80s, like or like '80s, even getting into like the '90s. Because I mean, you had like Batman come out like in '89, then they'd kind of do a Batman movie every few years, and they're with varying results depending on like what style of the Batman thing you like. But then I feel like at a certain point, like the effects got good enough where now like say, oh, we can do this thing. And it's like it went from like nobody wanting to touch it where now everybody wants to do it. And it feels like there's always that thing where like it's like the mainstream kind of doesn't, it's like things don't go mainstream. It's like the mainstream kind of comes to them. Cause like if you have something to say, like, okay, like one of your novels breaks through, suddenly that thing catches on and now they want like give us more until like
Mm-hmm.
people get sick of it and then they go to the river kind of shifts in a different direction.
And so yeah, it's like a blob, and it like reaches out and like pulls in. But so the problem is though, being too close to things that already exist, it can either make you or it can kill it, because like traditional publishers will actually acquire books that are like other books that they've published simply to ensure that they do not get published.
Mm.
It's a terrible practice. I hate it.
Yeah, it's dirty pool, but I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's absolutely it's real. It's the same thing like like businesses will just buy up another business, just because they don't want to deal with the competition.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, and that's it seemed like something that shouldn't be allowed, but it is. So let's like a bit of it. Let's get into your background a little bit. Like you, sound like you grew up in New England, if I'm remembering your website.
Yep. I was. This part's not in my bio, but I was born in New Jersey. Sorry, but I moved to
Not
Connecticut.
before.
when I was younger. So when I was 6, I moved to Connecticut and grew up in the Valley, which is in New Haven County. So like New Haven, the city, is where my books take place. And yeah, so I grew up in New England.
So a lot in this. So you're just drawing a lot on your surroundings.
Yeah, I went to college in New Haven. I went to Southern Connecticut State University for my undergraduate. I lived and worked in New Haven for a while. And in general, though, it was also just one of my favorite stomping grounds. It's like the New York of Connecticut. It's got, a lot of varied culture and food and experiences, museums, all sorts of stuff going on. It's also got, the never ending rivalry between Yale and everybody else. I am not a Yale kid. I went to a state school where we just pretty much made fun of Yale kids. Sorry, Bulldogs, if you're listening. You know how it is.
Yeah, that well, yeah. See, like in my state, yeah, the two big ones are. I'm here in Georgia, so it's like it's either UGA or Georgia Tech, but I went to Georgia Southern, so I can kind of snipe at both of them. So.
Mm-hmm.
Not neither one of them Ivy League, but yeah, if we want some Bulldogs to pick on, we have some.
Excellent.
Of course, they will beat the hell out of us in football, as they do with a lot of people these days. But that's just that's how it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, so it sounds like your areas, like it's like there's enough going on to be interesting, but it may not be so that necessarily like that frantic New York thing. But there's also there's no shortage of things based in New York, so it does kind of give you something to draw on, but also something that's maybe not as kind of omnipresent as a setting.
Yeah, I've done the Stephen King thing, and this is the only time that I liken myself to Stephen King, in that like he's got Maine, so like everything happens in Maine, and Stephen King, I mean not everything, but nearly everything happens in Maine, and so for the most part, my books are all based at least out of New Haven. So I have the 3 books in the series. That's all in New Haven. I have 2 other manuscripts that I've written that, ironically, I'm actually working with an agent right now to see whether or not we can get any interest in them from some traditional publishers. But we're doing it as kind of like a timed experiment before I publish them myself. But those 2, they're both independent in that they are not of this series. They're both either standalones or series starters themselves, and they both take place in New Haven. And the city is varied enough in both like its downtown and its suburbs, outlying areas, that all of them feel different, even though they're all in the same city. So yeah, I'm planning on utilizing New Haven for as long as I can make it feel a little bit different per book.
Well, I think it's cool that when you can find a setting that not everybody already knows so much about, because I feel like when you get all the stuff that's out of like New York or LA, you've already heard so much about those. It's just kind of like you're always, it's kind of walking on a path that's very kind of well traveled, to where everybody already kind of knows. Okay, and then you got to be very, and it's probably like a double-edged sword. On one hand, everyone's familiar with it, but at the same time, everyone already kind of knows it. So you're kind of going, well, it's like, well, it's easy to draw on, and maybe because like it, but again, so is everyone else. And then whereas you get something new, like now you can kind of get to like introduce that to the world.
Yeah, I mean, when I do world building, it's really fleshing out how my version of it exists on top of the map that's already there. I have nothing against like truly speculative fiction and fantasy that like makes its own world. I'm not really, I like urban fantasy too much. It's my favorite genre to read also. And like, will I write something where I have to build a world eventually? Maybe, but right now my stories don't have time for that,
Well, sometimes it's interesting that people can find more, I don't know if say freedom is the word, but or maybe just more creative juice from working within certain restraints. And is that the case of like when you're setting this stuff like in New Haven? Is it kind of like, okay, I have these certain boundaries that I have to work within, and now that instead of trying to create something totally new, you just like, okay, here's the box, and I know where I need to paint with inside of it.
Yeah, I really like that aspect. And so one of my newer manuscripts, so in this first series, everything is renamed. No real business names are used. They are not necessarily even referenced well enough that you would know which one they are. Some of them are, but in my newer series, I do actually reference like real world locations, but a lot of them are it's a real world location that then has something different associated with it. Like maybe this business actually has a secret speakeasy in that you go through a closet and there it is. It's like one of the really cool things about being a fantasy author is that you can take creative license. I can look on a map and you can follow the character where they go. And like, that's really cool. But then on top of that, I'm going to have like little nooks and crannies that don't exist that I can then create. So yeah, it gives me freedom in that I can splash some paint around inside of the diorama that already exists.
Nice. It's funny. I did actually go to a speakeasy in a place when I was traveling one time. I think you did actually have to go through a closet. Actually, there's another one. There's one nearby me where you actually, it looks like you're going into a freezer. So, and then, you go back around. So that's one of the things I do when I go out, like we start looking around for speakeasies. There's one in New York where you have to go into like a Five Guys. And you can tell the guys no, because if they just see you just standing around looking, they'll point you to it. They go like, you're here for the joint. Yeah. Okay. Up. No, around the corner upstairs. Cause they just see people you can tell they're like, you get that look where you're just kind of like, and they know right away. They already know. They're not like, do you want to? They're just like, nope, upstairs.
It's nice that they don't pretend because they could really mess with some people.
Oh man, I'm sure like I guess it speaks to them like being actually nice guys, but like, man, you could have so much fun with people up there in that situation. Cause it's one of those things like when you walk into the place, like you have no idea. You're just like, I was told there was a place here and all I'm seeing is like a bunch of dudes slinging burgers and fries.
And then someone's like, sir, I'm going to have to call the police.
It's sir, either order something or leave.
This is a Wendy's.
No, but I mean, I guess that's the fun thing, like with your genre, is that you get to do stuff like that. And I mean, and then plus like, you with the fantasy aspect, it's always kind of fun it's always fun to see like things in that setting where you can kind of turn something ordinary into something, magical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every author has to decide like what kind of magic system you're going to use. Like Brandon Sanderson has really popularized like the axes of magic systems, whether it's hard or soft magic or it is nebulous or specific. And like Brandon Sanderson's stuff is in that top quadrant of like hard specific magic systems, but mine tend more towards the soft and nebulous. And there are rules. So like, and that's also one way to differentiate books. So like my first series, there's a combination of like witchcraft and what I call supernatural contract law. And then in my next two books, one is focused on indigenous like myths and folklore because Connecticut has really rich indigenous history and a number of tribes that still live in the area, and so it focuses more on that kind of magic and magic as a natural resource. And then my next book focuses entirely on Jewish magic, which for the record, so I'm Jewish. And I did not know until I was doing the research for this book how much just straight up demonology is in like scripture, and it is crazy business. Very, very cool. So like on top of all of the other stuff, I can't wait for that book to come out.
It always made me wonder, like reading those some of the older stuff in the Bible, like they were really against witches. Like makes me wonder either like it's like because there's always the thing like we go back in mythology, right? And you wonder like was there something actually there that they just didn't know how to describe, and maybe they were so it does always and I'm always like, well, I'll believe in like witchcraft or spells when someone actually shows up and casts something on me, right? But for like a book though, it's it's always great when you can find like some of the old stuff, because it seems like there's never like every culture, every tradition has got some form of that in it somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it's kind of the progression that I'm going in the series. Can I show the?
Oh, go for
So
it.
like, so we've got my boss is the devil, all right, and then we've got the main character Nick, and we've got Lucifer. You can see them on the cover. So we
I
introduce.
really like the artwork on those
I I,
covers.
I adore my covers. Most people wouldn't believe me that it's done through. It's a budget design firm called Get Covers that I recommend for
Okay.
every independent author who's like, I can't afford a cover. Yes, you can. And they don't use AI because generative AI is a blight on society for artists and in general. But they don't use AI. They basically take stock art, which you sometimes have to be careful because some stock art is made with generative AI. But as long as you're,
It's becoming a thing you
yeah,
just can't escape.
but as long as you're picky, you can avoid it entirely because they don't use it in their design process. So basically, you pick 2 or 3 pieces of stock art, and they design a cover to your like whims, and then you just revise it. So yeah, so my boss is the devil is with Nick and Lucifer. Then you've got dueling shoulder angels, and this is Nick, and then one of the supporting characters in the first book, whose name is Amy. She is a goth witch because I wrote that book at a specific time in my life. Luckily, my partner right now is also kind of a goth witch, so really, I won the lottery on that one. Um,
Hey,
this involves Nick and Amy, but also both Lucifer and God. So we go from just talking about the devil to now introducing God into the mix, and where you wondered whether Lucifer is the bad guy, now you get to wonder whether or not God is the good guy. And then in the third book, Too Many Gods in the Kitchen, we actually introduce 2 more gods from other pantheons. This is where we start branching outside of the Abrahamic religions. You can tell on the cover that that's a Hindu deity.
yeah.
We also go for one that is not Hindu, but we start branching out. So you've got God, you've got the devil, you've got some other pantheons, and we start getting a little crazy. Uh, but all of it is still grounded in the actual like mythology and practices of those religions. I'm very happy to say that I have a number of like friends that are Hindu, and I consulted with them when I was writing that part because I also have a supporting character who is Hindu, and the family is, and you always want to make sure you're doing your best to represent cultures that you do not belong to the right way. And the good news is I've had people that I do not know who are Indian and Hindu read the third book and thought that I handled it very well. So
It's
like,
always good when you have people who can set you right.
yeah.
When you need that reference, someone who's right there can be like, nope, nope, you messed that up. Go
Mm-hmm.
back. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. Okay, that's and yeah, because yeah, Hinduism is a whole other. What little I know of it, and it's yeah, it's that you could do God knows how many books just on that one. If you
Oh yeah, another indie author who's a friend of mine, writes under Niranjan. She writes. I think the book. I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, but I think the first book is Pradutitya, and it won a number of like. It was either a finalist or won some indie book awards, and it's based on a specific Hindu myth. So yeah, you could absolutely do entire series based on that.
Oh yeah, I said if someone hasn't done it, someone will, because
Mhm.
that's again, I have my wife is Indian, so but they're not like she doesn't. I don't think her family's like super religious, but or at least she's not. But yeah, what little exposure I've had to that, you just go, man, someone could have. Well, I mean, my God, the whole Bollywood. God knows how many movies they've made about that subject. I've seen some very old ones, and I'm just thinking. And then I know there's like stuff, especially the stuff now, like with the way effects have gotten, like you could go crazy. If someone hasn't already done it, like I said, it's I feel like that one's just out there. It's just out hanging out there waiting for someone to play with it.
There are a number of authors who have done similar things. Like there's other series and cycles that focus on Hindu mythology. But the irony being, many of them are by indie authors that no one will have heard of because it's hard to get traction for your books as an indie author.
Well, hopefully we can do something about that.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, as we're past the half hour, tell people where they can find you online if excuse me, if they want to at you or check out your stuff.
All right, you can at me on most of the social media platforms. Most of them I am Ben Shenkman, author, but you can find me on my website. It's benshenkman.com. And my books are available on Amazon. The ebooks right now, so they are exclusive to Amazon because they're part of the Kindle Unlimited program. So if you already pay for your subscription, you can tear through all 3 books. By all accounts from my readers, they are very easy reads, though they cover some deeper topics. If you want a physical copy, that's available at most retailers. So not just Amazon, but if you like Barnes & Noble and whatnot, you just won't be able to get it in the store. But you can order it online from wherever you want. My audiobook is available on most audio platforms at this point. The first one is out. The second one I hope to have out by the end of this month. I'm just doing some final recording and editing for that. But yeah, and my link tree is on my website, or I'm going to go check it after this. And if it isn't, it will be momentarily.
Awesome. Well, we'll try to include as much as we can into the show notes for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, please do.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming out, and we'll be on the lookout for your stuff.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Brandon.
That will be all for this episode. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. To learn more about this show or other podcasts, visit carcuttamedia.com/podcasts or follow us on social media at Carcutta Media. This recording or any portion thereof may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2025 by Carcutta Media. All rights reserved.